While under English rule, King George III forbade colonists from venturing and settling west of the Appalachian Mountains through the proclamation of 1763. A boundary was established west of the mountains as land reserved for indigenous nations. After the Revolutionary War, the king's edicts were overturned. The September 3, 1783 signing of the Treaty of Paris not only signified the end of the American Revolution, but opened the door for westward expansion. Up until the late 1700s, most colonial citizens lived east of the Appalachian mountain ranges, which stretches from Newfoundland in Canada into central Alabama. This ancient land formation includes several smaller ranges. Among them are the Catskill Mountains, White Mountains, and Green Mountains, which rise to the north, the Great Smoky Mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains, and Black Mountains extend to the south. Since the 13 states were bound by the Appalachians and Atlantic Ocean, cities and towns became dense with overcrowding, and work was difficult to find. In the mid-1770s, the colonial population was 2.5 million people. Just 20 years later, after George Washington became president, the 1790 federal census reported nearly 4 million people living in the 13 states and 2 territories. This figure excluded indigenous tribes. Those living in or near the coastal cities of New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Charleston, and others were close to trading ports. Large ships from around the world could be found docked at seaport wharfs. American businessmen and farmers could export a wide range of goods. Imports from other countries brought sought-after merchandise not found in the States. These cities were also the hub of social life, education, and religion. This return to normalcy took time. The last British soldiers set sail from New York City to England in November 1783. During their occupation, British soldiers and loyalists had forced patriot families from their houses. Upon returning home, families often found their property destroyed or looted. One such example is British officers, including Major John Andre, used Benjamin Franklin's house as their headquarters. While Benjamin was in Paris negotiating the Treaty of Alliance between America and France, his wife Deborah and other family members were forced to evacuate as British troops marched into Philadelphia. When the British evacuated the city, General Charles Grey ordered Andre to take valuable household items, scientific instruments, and a portrait of Benjamin Franklin. The painting was later returned by Gray's descendants. As American families reestablished their homes, the large coastal cities experienced expansion in industry, trade, and urban improvements. These further steps into the first industrial age, which began in 1770, led to more people moving into these metropolitan areas. After the war, housing shortages and limited job opportunities may have led some families to make the decision to venture across the Appalachian Mountains. Per the 1790 census, 97% of heads of households were farmers. During the war years, 1775 to 1783, farmers supplied the armies with food. Daily rations included flour or bread, rice, meat, vegetables, milk, and beer or spirits. Soldiers and camp followers, which included women and children, often went without supplies for long periods of time, sometimes to the point of starvation. Farmers found it difficult to transport supplies to encampments. They also stopped growing large quantities of crops. As in the cities, farming families were often forced to quickly flee their property. Advancing armies often plundered houses, crops, and livestock. Due to government taxes and unpaid debts, some farmers lost their property. The American Revolution had inflated prices of goods and land. After the war, prices dropped, leaving farmers unable to pay what they owed. Farmers found their once fertile farmland destroyed by the effects of battle. While plowing, they often discovered weapons and ammunition scattered throughout the fields. The bones of patriot and British soldiers were unearthed from shallow graves. Colonists who had already ventured across the Appalachians described the rich, fertile soil found west of the mountains and along the Ohio River and other waterways. Land prices were comparatively cheap. Were farmers willing to leave behind the land in which they poured their sweat equity? In many cases, the answer was yes. People who strongly opposed enslavement wanted to move into areas that supported freedom for all. The Society of Friends, or Quakers, were counted among this group. In 1688, Quakers petitioned for the emancipation of slaves. They tried once again in 1787. Some families of the Society of Friends eventually migrated into Canada, the northeastern states, and Northwest Territory. In 1787, the Northwest Ordinance prohibited slave owners from bringing slaves into this newly established territory west of the Appalachians. African American soldiers, free persons of color, and escaped slaves sought a life of safety and freedom in the northeastern states and in the Northwest Territory. Revolutionary War soldiers were promised land bounties as an enticement to volunteer or enlist in the Continental Army. Veterans were given the same opportunity as a reward for their service in the War for Independence. In 1781, General George Rogers Clark, along with 64 officers and 236 privates in his regiment, received land bounties for their service. This was known as Clark's Grant. Some of these men captured Fort Sackville in Vincennes, Indiana, from British control. Land tracts totaled 150,000 acres in southern Indiana. Since there was not enough land for all of the privates, Virginia's legislature provided land in southern Ohio and western Kentucky. Other Revolutionary veterans followed their adult children across the eastern mountain ranges and into Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. More than 2,000 Revolutionary soldiers and patriots eventually moved into Indiana. These families were searching for a new beginning, a fresh start. Decisions needed to be made as our ancestors prepared to leave their colonial homes and lands. The long journey to Indiana would be a difficult and sometimes dangerous adventure into the unknown.